The chamber was filled with voices from hundreds of different species when Daniel Grant stood up from his seat. He had been sitting there for 3 hours listening to the council members argue about trade routes and mining rights, while his people were dying. His uniform looked worn and his eyes showed the exhaustion of someone who had not slept properly in weeks. Behind him stood Captain Lisa Monroe and Commander Jake Peterson, both officers from the Earth Defense Fleet. They wore their dress uniforms, but the fabric could not hide the tension in their bodies. Daniel waited for silence, but it did not come easily. The council members continued their discussions as if the human delegation was not even present. Finally, he raised his hand and activated the speaking platform. His voice cut through the noise with a clarity that made several alien representatives turn their attention toward him. He spoke about the Kryn swarm and how they had attacked the outer human colonies without warning. He explained that 70,000 civilians had died in the first wave of attacks. He reminded the council that humanity had signed a mutual defense pact 47 years ago, when Earth first joined the galactic community. He asked, not for the first time, for military support to push back the invasion. High Counselor Thex of the Valix Empire leaned forward in his elevated seat. His 4 eyes blinked in a pattern that showed dismissal rather than concern. He said that humanity had expanded too quickly into disputed space. He claimed that the Council had warned Earth about moving into those territories. He stated clearly that the Council could not waste resources on every species that made poor decisions. Around the massive circular chamber, representatives from 200 different species remained quiet. Some looked away from Daniel's face. Others displayed what passed for satisfaction among their kind. No one spoke in support of the human request. Daniel continued speaking despite the growing hopelessness he felt. He reminded them that humanity had helped rebuild the Taurian Collective after the Cascade Plague devastated their worlds. He mentioned how human agricultural scientists had solved the Denari famine when their crops failed for 3 consecutive years. He listed every time Earth had answered a call for help from the Council without hesitation or demands for payment. Counselor Preen of the Sardax coiled her long body in a gesture of impatience. She said that humanity had been compensated fairly for their services. She called Daniel's words emotional appeals and said they were becoming tiresome to listen to. Several other council members made sounds that indicated agreement. Daniel felt something break inside him at that moment. It was not anger exactly, but rather a cold understanding that changed everything. He closed the datapad he had been holding and looked around the chamber one final time. He saw species that humanity had saved from disaster. He saw civilizations that had benefited from human generosity and innovation. He saw politicians who cared more about power than lives. Lisa stepped forward and placed her hand on the ceremonial sword at her hip. She said that humanity was withdrawing from the Galactic Council effective immediately. She stated that all treaties, trade agreements, and defense pacts were now void. Her voice carried no emotion, but her eyes burned with controlled fury. The chamber erupted in response, but not with concern. Many of the council members laughed or made their species equivalent of amused sounds. Thex waved one of his appendages in a gesture of dismissal. He said that humanity could not simply leave the council. He mentioned the charter requirements and the procedures that had to be followed. Daniel interrupted him with words that had been building inside for weeks. He said that humanity had signed the charter in good faith. He explained that faith required trust on both sides. He stated that a council which watched human civilians die and called it politics had broken that faith completely. He declared that the Terran Federation owed nothing to beings who valued political convenience over honor. Jake moved to stand beside Lisa and Daniel. He said that humanity would find its own path forward. He mentioned that Earth had always been good at solving impossible problems. He suggested that the Council should not underestimate what desperate humans could accomplish when left alone. Thex made a clicking sound that his translator interpreted as laughter. He said that humanity would return soon enough. He asked where Earth would purchase advanced medical supplies now. He questioned how humans would obtain quantum drives for their ships. He wondered aloud who would sell them null shields and other technologies they could not produce themselves. Daniel smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. He said that humanity would figure out how to make those things themselves. He added that humans had always been good at learning and adapting. He thanked the Council for teaching Earth an important lesson about self-reliance. The 3 humans turned and walked toward the exit. Their footsteps echoed in the chamber as the council members returned to their discussions. Already the representatives were forgetting about the human delegation. Already they were moving on to other business. They treated the human withdrawal as a minor tantrum from an emotional species that would soon realize their mistake and come crawling back. Lisa, Jake, and Daniel walked through the corridors of the council station without speaking. Other species passed them in the halls, but no one stopped to ask questions or express concern. The humans had been part of the galactic community for nearly 5 decades, but in that moment they felt completely alone. When they reached their ship, a small diplomatic vessel called the Mercury, they finally allowed themselves to show emotion. Lisa slammed her fist against the bulkhead. Jake sat down heavily in the pilot seat and put his head in his hands. Daniel stood at the viewport looking back at the massive station that represented everything humanity had hoped to be part of. He thought about the families of those 70,000 dead civilians. He wondered how he would explain to them that the galaxy had decided their lives were not worth saving. He questioned whether humanity had made a mistake by reaching for the stars and joining a community that did not truly accept them. But then he thought about human history. He remembered how many times humanity had faced extinction or disaster on Earth. He recalled how humans had always found a way to survive and grow stronger. He realized that being alone was not the same as being defeated. Jake started the engines and set course for Earth. The journey would take several weeks even with the quantum drive. That would give them time to prepare their report and recommendations. That would give Earth's leaders time to decide what came next for humanity. As the Mercury pulled away from the council station, Daniel made a silent promise to those 70,000 dead. Humanity would survive this betrayal. Humanity would grow stronger. And one day the Galactic Council would understand the mistake they had made. But by then it would be too late for apologies. The ship jumped to faster than light speed and left the council behind. In the chamber, the representatives continued their political games, completely unaware that they had just made the worst decision in galactic history. They had dismissed humanity as weak and dependent. They would learn how wrong they were. But first, they would learn what silence truly meant. 9 months had passed since the human delegation walked out of the council chamber. Trade Administrator Velen of the Chorus sat in his office reviewing quarterly reports with growing confusion that slowly turned into concern. The numbers told a story that should not have been possible for such a short time period. Every human ship had disappeared from council space. The busy trade routes that once carried human vessels between stations now stood empty of Earth traffic. The listening posts that humanity had maintained near dangerous sectors were abandoned and dark. The embassies that had represented human interests on dozens of worlds were closed with no forwarding information. Velen called his assistant core into the office and asked about communication with Earth. The young Valix checked the records and confirmed that humanity had sent no messages to any council species. No requests, no complaints, no diplomatic correspondence of any kind. It was as if humanity had simply erased itself from galactic affairs. Core mentioned that several ships had tried to enter human space to re-establish contact. Each vessel had been turned away at the border by human defense forces. The rejections were polite but absolutely firm. Humanity was closed for business and offered no explanation why. Velen looked at the specific trade numbers and felt his scales ripple with unease. Medical supplies that Earth had provided to 17 different species had stopped completely. Agricultural shipments that fed 4 colony clusters in the outer reach had ceased. Technical support contracts that humanity had maintained for dozens of species were simply abandoned. The Denari were sending urgent requests for human grain shipments. Their population had grown dependent on Earth food exports after their own agricultural problems. Now they were facing potential famine again, and the humans were not responding to any communication attempts. The Sardax mining operations were experiencing severe problems. For 30 years, human engineers had maintained the quantum drill arrays that the Sardax purchased, but never fully understood how to operate. Without human technicians, the machinery was breaking down. The Sardax were discovering that they had no idea how to repair or maintain their most important industrial equipment. The Taurian Collective was dealing with a new strain of the Cascade Plague. They had sent desperate messages to Earth requesting the antiviral treatments that human biochemists had developed. Every message came back marked as undeliverable. The Taurians possessed the formula for the medicine, but lacked the precision manufacturing techniques to actually produce it. Human scientists had always handled that part of the process. In the council chamber, Councillor Preen raised concerns for the first time since the humans departed. She said that the silence from Earth was becoming troublesome. She suggested that someone should verify what humanity was actually doing with itself. Another councillor reported that a diplomatic vessel had been sent to human space 2 weeks ago. The ship had been met at the border by human defense forces. The humans stated politely that Earth was focusing on internal development. They expressed no interest in external relations at the current time. They refused to provide any additional information. High Councillor Thex made a dismissive sound. He said that humanity was probably sulking about the Council's decision. He claimed their technology was 50 years behind Council standards. He suggested that Earth would realize its mistake soon and come begging to rejoin. But in the dark of space beyond the borders that the Council could observe, humanity was working with focused intensity. Thousands of scientists, engineers, and technicians collaborated on projects that would have seemed impossible 9 months ago. Commander Jake Peterson stood on the bridge of a new ship called the Liberty. It was one of 50 vessels in Earth's rapid deployment fleet. Every ship had been built with one purpose: to ensure humanity would never again depend on alien mercy for survival. Lieutenant Amy Walsh reported from the tactical station. She said the quantum drives were fully operational. She confirmed that all systems were showing optimal performance. She added that the test results were exceeding their initial projections. Jake nodded and ordered her to take them through the complete test sequence. He said that humanity needed to understand every system they built from the ground up. He was not interested in using technology they did not fully comprehend. The truth was that human engineers had reverse-engineered the quantum drives that Council species sold them. More than that, they had improved the design. Human scientists discovered that the Council versions were inefficient and unnecessarily complex. The Earth versions were faster, more reliable, and used less power. On Earth itself, Dr. Helen Foster presented findings to the Federation Science Council. She explained that humanity had not only replicated null shield technology, but had enhanced it significantly. The new human shields were 30% more efficient and required considerably less power to maintain. Director Paul Martinez listened carefully and asked how long until full production could begin. Helen said 6 months at most. She mentioned that manufacturing facilities were being built on Luna and Titan. She added that Mars had volunteered to handle additional production if needed. Paul asked about medical supplies. Helen smiled and said that production was already underway. She explained that humanity no longer needed Council pharmaceutical companies. Everything they used to purchase could now be manufactured on Earth or its colonies. In most cases, the human versions were superior to the Council equivalents. Paul allowed himself a slight smile. He said that the Council had thought humanity needed them. Helen corrected him and said that humanity had needed them. Past tense. She added that the Council should have helped when asked. Instead, they gave Earth the motivation to become self-sufficient. Across human space, similar conversations were happening. Shipyards worked around the clock building new vessels. Research stations pushed the boundaries of what human science could accomplish. Manufacturing facilities produced goods that Earth previously imported. The memory of 70,000 dead civilians drove every project forward. The sound of Council laughter in that chamber echoed in the minds of everyone who worked. Humanity had been dismissed as weak and dependent. They were proving otherwise. With every passing day, Lisa Monroe visited one of the new shipyards in orbit around Mars. She watched workers assemble the hull of a massive carrier that would dwarf anything in the current human fleet. The foreman, a man named George Harper, explained that they were ahead of schedule. Lisa asked how that was possible. George said that people were volunteering for extra shifts without being asked. He mentioned that workers were solving problems faster than expected. He explained that everyone understood what was at stake. Back on Earth, Daniel Grant worked in his new role as Federation Secretary of External Affairs. His office received requests from 30 different Council species. All wanted to re-establish trade relations. All wanted access to human technology. All offered what they considered generous terms. Daniel read through each request carefully. None mentioned the 70,000 dead. None offered apologies for the Council's decision. They were simply business propositions from species that were discovering they had problems without human help. He filed the requests without responding. Humanity was not ready to engage with the Council yet. Perhaps they never would be. That decision could be made later when Earth was truly secure. In the Sardax territories, mining output had dropped by 40%. The Sardax leadership met an emergency session to discuss the crisis. Someone suggested they offer humanity significant payment to return and fix their equipment. Another Sardax pointed out that humans were not responding to any communication. A third mentioned that even if Earth did respond, the Sardax had nothing humanity seemed to want anymore. They had always assumed humans would be available. They never considered what would happen if Earth simply walked away. The Taurian death toll from the new plague reached 2 million. Their medical teams worked desperately to produce the antiviral treatment, but kept failing. The precision required was beyond their current capabilities. They had always relied on human expertise and never developed their own. Councillor Preen called a private meeting with several other representatives. She said that the human situation needed to be discussed candidly. She claimed that their silence had continued long enough. Velen attended the meeting and listened to the other councillors talk about punishment and teaching humanity a lesson. Finally, he interrupted and said that humanity was not punishing anyone. He explained that they were simply doing what the council told them to do. They were solving their own problems. Another councillor said that humanity was solving problems without council assistance. Velen agreed and added that this was proving to be the council's problem rather than Earth's. Preen suggested that the council extend an official apology. She proposed offering to renegotiate human membership with better terms. She admitted that perhaps a mistake had been made. Velen shook his head slowly. He said that he did not think humanity cared about council membership anymore. He explained that Earth was moving forward without looking back. He suggested that the council had missed their opportunity to make things right. The meeting ended without any decisions being made. The councillors returned to their duties, still not understanding what had truly changed. 15 months had passed since humanity closed its borders, the Galactic Council chamber filled with an urgency that had been absent during the human departure. High Councillor Thek stood before the assembly looking diminished compared to his usual commanding presence. His confidence had eroded over the past year as the Velix Empire faced a threat they could not overcome. The Kryn swarm had consumed the disputed territories where humanity once maintained colonies. Now the swarm had turned its attention to council space. 12 Velix colonies had fallen in rapid succession. The Velix military, once considered the second most powerful in known space, found itself unable to stop the relentless advance. Thex requested immediate military intervention from the council. He explained that the swarm was adapting to Velix tactics faster than anticipated. He admitted that their weapons were proving less effective with each engagement. He said something that clearly caused him pain, that the Velix needed human tactical support. Councillor Preen asked why the Velix could not handle a mindless swarm with their massive fleet. Her tone suggested she was enjoying Thex's discomfort. The political games continued even as the threat grew worse. Thex explained that the swarm was not mindless. It learned from every battle. It adapted its defenses against whatever weapons were used. He said that human military advisors had understood the swarm in ways that Velix strategists did not. He admitted that humanity's tactical flexibility had been underestimated. Another councillor suggested that Thex simply contact Earth and request assistance. Thex replied that the Velix had tried repeatedly. Every message went unanswered. Humanity was maintaining complete silence toward all council species. The chamber fell quiet as the representatives absorbed this information. For the first time, several councillors began to understand the scope of their mistake. Trade Administrator Velen stood to present his own crisis report. He explained that the economic situation was deteriorating across council space. 73 member species had depended on human goods or services. Many had no alternatives available. The Denari were experiencing food shortages that threatened to become a full famine. The Sardax mining output continued to decline as more quantum drill arrays failed. The Taurian plague had now killed over 2 million people and continued spreading faster than they could treat it. One councillor suggested finding new suppliers to replace human services. Velen said they had tried extensively. He explained that humanity had not simply been suppliers, they had been problem solvers. When the Denari faced famine, humans did not just send food. They sent agricultural specialists who taught better farming techniques. When the Sardaks bought quantum drills, humans maintained them because the Sardaks never learned how the technology worked. Velen continued explaining that the Council had taken human expertise for granted. Humanity had filled gaps in dozens of civilizations without anyone realizing how dependent they had become. Now those gaps were becoming critical failures. Thex insisted that humanity was just one species among thousands. He said the Council would adapt. He claimed they would find solutions, but adaptation proved harder than Thex wanted to admit. The Velix lost 3 more colony clusters to the Kryn swarm. Their military leaders held emergency meetings trying to develop new tactics. Every strategy they tried seemed to work once before the swarm learned to counter it. The Sardak's economy began a serious collapse as mining operations ground to a halt. Mining was the foundation of Sardak's wealth and power. Without functioning quantum drills, they could not extract the rare minerals that made their civilization prosperous. They had grown dependent on human engineering without developing their own expertise. The Taurian death toll reached 3 million. Medical facilities were overwhelmed. Doctors worked until exhaustion trying to save lives. The government sent increasingly desperate messages to Earth begging for help. Every message returned undelivered. A Velix patrol encountered something unexpected near the former disputed territories. They found evidence of a battle. Swarm hive clusters had been destroyed with remarkable efficiency. The debris pattern suggested advanced weapons technology beyond current Council capabilities. The patrol investigated further and discovered something that shocked them. Human ships had been there. Fresh burn marks on destroyed swarm vessels matched no known Council weapons. Whatever humanity had used was new and devastatingly effective. The patrol commander sent a priority report to the Velix military command. She described weapons signatures that suggested Earth had made significant technological advances. She estimated that 3 swarm hive clusters had been eliminated in under 2 hours. Thex read the report multiple times trying to understand the implications. 2 years ago, human weapons technology had been 50 years behind Council standards. Now they were using systems that the Velix could not identify or replicate. The patrol had attempted to contact the human ships. They wanted to ask how Earth had developed such effective weapons against the swarm. The human vessels had ignored all communication attempts. They completed their mission and departed without acknowledging the Velix presence. Preen called another private meeting with trusted counselors. She spread the patrol report across the table and asked what they were really facing. She said that humanity was not behaving like a species that needed the Council. Velen agreed and added that human behavior suggested they no longer wanted anything from the Council either. He explained that species which needed support did not develop revolutionary weapons technology. They did not close their borders. They did not ignore desperate pleas for help. One counselor suggested that humanity was being deliberately cruel. Another claimed Earth was trying to teach the Council a lesson. Preen shook her head and said they were missing the point. She explained that humanity had moved on. Earth was not trying to teach lessons or punish anyone. They were simply taking care of their own interests. The Council had become irrelevant to human concerns. Velen added that this was unprecedented in galactic history. Species did not usually develop self-sufficiency so quickly. They did not create technological breakthroughs in mere months. They did not transform from dependent to independent in less than 2 years. Preen said that perhaps humanity had never been truly dependent. Perhaps Earth had been capable of these achievements all along. Perhaps humans had chosen cooperation over isolation until the Council proved that cooperation was a mistake. The private meeting continued for hours, but reached no conclusions. The counselors could not decide how to approach a species that showed no interest in talking to them. Meanwhile, the problems continued growing worse. The Velix lost 2 more colonies. The Sardak's government faced protests as economic conditions deteriorated. The Taurian medical system began collapsing under the weight of the plague. Other Council species started experiencing their own problems. A species called the Vex discovered that their atmospheric processors were failing. Human technicians had maintained the systems for decades. Without them, the Vex were learning that they did not understand their own life support infrastructure. The Pel encountered a spatial anomaly near their homeworld. They sent requests to Earth for scientific assistance. Humans had helped them navigate similar anomalies in the past. The messages went unanswered, and the Pell had to evacuate 3 orbital stations when their own scientists could not solve the problem. Across Council space, the pattern repeated. Species discovered gaps in their knowledge, capabilities, and infrastructure. Humanity had quietly filled those gaps for years. Now the gaps were becoming dangerous. In the council chamber, debates grew more heated. Some counselors wanted to send a military force to Earth and demand cooperation. Others suggested economic sanctions. A few voices began suggesting that perhaps the council should admit they had made a mistake. Thex opposed any admission of error. He argued that doing so would show weakness. He claimed that humanity would eventually realize they needed the council. He insisted they just needed to wait. Veln stood and said that waiting was not working. He explained that every week brought new crises. He asked how many more species needed to suffer before the council acknowledged reality. Preen supported Veln and added that pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. She said the council needed to extend a genuine apology and offer real concessions to bring humanity back. The debate continued without resolution. The council remained divided between those who understood the severity of the situation and those who clung to old assumptions about galactic politics. Far from council space, humanity continued working. Ship production accelerated. New technologies moved from research to deployment. Training exercises prepared human forces for threats the council had dismissed. Captain Lisa Monroe stood on the bridge of the Defiant, the new flagship of Earth's defense fleet. She reviewed tactical reports showing that human forces had eliminated 5 more swarm hive clusters. The operations had gone perfectly. Not a single human casualty. She thought about the council chamber where Thex had laughed at Earth's request for help. She wondered if he was still laughing. She suspected not. The swarm was teaching the Velix what humanity had learned the hard way. In space, pride and politics meant nothing. Only capability mattered, and humanity's capability was growing with every passing day. 22 months after humanity closed its borders, the Galactic Council received a report that changed everything. A Velix patrol had been observing swarm movements near former human territories when they witnessed something extraordinary. Human ships had appeared without warning and engaged 3 swarm hive clusters simultaneously. The battle lasted less than 2 hours. When it ended, all 3 hive clusters were destroyed. The human fleet departed as suddenly as it had arrived, leaving no communication and offering no explanation. The patrol commander sent detailed scans to Velix Military Command. The weapons signatures showed technology that seemed impossible. Human ships moved faster than their old quantum drives should have allowed. Their shields absorbed swarm attacks that would have destroyed Velix vessels. Their weapons cut through swarm defenses like they did not exist. High Counselor Thex read the report 3 times. 2 years ago, human technology had been decades behind council standards. Now Earth was deploying systems that made Velix military equipment look primitive by comparison. Captain Lisa Monroe commanded the Defiant, the flagship leading the human operation. Her crew had just finished eliminating the swarm threat when Lieutenant Chris Allen reported incoming communication from the Velix patrol. Lisa asked what they wanted. Chris said the Velix were requesting dialogue. They wanted to know how humanity had developed such effective weapons. They were asking for tactical information about fighting the swarm. Lisa told Chris to ignore the transmission. She said humanity was not there for the Velix. She explained that Earth had cleared the swarm from that sector because it threatened human interests, not to help the Council. Chris mentioned that the Velix were becoming more insistent. They were asking how Earth had made such rapid technological progress. Lisa smiled without warmth. She told Chris to send a simple message. Tell them that humanity figured it out themselves just like they always did. The Defiant and its sister ships turned toward human space. They left the Velix patrol with nothing but questions and a growing sense that the galaxy had changed in ways the Council did not understand. On Earth, former Ambassador Daniel Grant reviewed requests from his office as Federation Secretary of External Affairs. 30 Council species had sent formal inquiries. All wanted to re-establish trade relations. All requested access to human technology. All offered what they considered generous terms. Daniel showed the requests to Director Paul Martinez. Paul read through several and asked what Daniel thought they should do. Daniel said that the Council species were scared. The swarm was not slowing down. Their economies were struggling. They were realizing that humanity had not been just another minor species. Paul asked if Earth should help them. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. He asked Paul if he remembered the council chamber. He asked if Paul recalled when he begged for help and the council laughed. Paul said he remembered every detail. Daniel said that the families of 70,000 dead remembered too. He said that letting people die because it was politically inconvenient was something the council did, not something humanity should do. He explained that humans were better than that. Paul asked what Daniel wanted to do. Daniel said that Earth should help, but on human terms this time. He explained that humanity had proven they did not need the council. If council species wanted Earth's help, they needed to understand that the old relationship was over forever. 3 weeks later, a single human vessel arrived at the main council station. It was not a military ship, but a diplomatic transport. Admiral Jake Peterson, recently promoted, disembarked as humanity's military liaison. High Counselor Thex met Jake in a private chamber away from the main council floor. The Valix looked smaller somehow, less confident than Jake remembered from the last meeting. Thex thanked Jake for coming and said the council wanted to discuss re-establishing relations. Jake said he was there as a courtesy, not because humanity needed anything. He told Thex to make it quick because he had other responsibilities. Thex began with what sounded like a prepared speech. He said the council wished to extend an official apology for their response to Earth's crisis. He admitted that the council had failed in their obligations as allies. He said mistakes had been made. Jake interrupted and said that the Valix were not allies. He explained that allies helped each other. He said the council had been parasites. Humanity gave and gave, and when Earth needed something in return, the council laughed. Thex closed his eyes in what might have been shame. He said that Jake was correct. He explained that the council had debated extensively since humanity's departure. He claimed they now understood how much they had depended on human contributions. He asked what terms Earth would require for re-establishing relations. Jake pulled out a data crystal and placed it on the table. He said that humanity would provide military assistance against the swarm. Earth would re-establish limited trade for essential goods only, specifically medical supplies and food for species facing humanitarian crises. Humans would share specific technologies on a case-by-case basis. Thex asked what humanity wanted in return. Jake said nothing. Thex repeated the word with confusion. Jake explained that Earth did not need anything from the council anymore. He continued explaining that humanity would help, because it was the right thing to do, not because they wanted something in return, but Thex needed to understand that Earth was no longer a council member. Humans were not subject to council laws, politics, or judgment. They would help when they chose and how they chose. Thex said the council would never accept such terms. He claimed Jake was asking them to admit humanity was equal without membership or oversight. Jake stood to leave and said that humanity was not asking. Earth was telling the council how things would be from now on. Jake explained that the council could accept help under these conditions or face the swarm alone. Either way, humanity would be fine. Earth had proven they could take care of themselves. He paused at the door and added one more thing. He said that every species Earth helped would receive education and training. Humans would teach them how to maintain their own equipment. They would show them how to develop their own solutions. Earth was done enabling dependency. Jake left the chamber. Thex sat alone considering the data crystal. For the first time in his long political career, he understood that he held no leverage. Humanity had all the power in this relationship. The council needed Earth. Earth did not need the council. Across council space, news of Jake's visit spread quickly. Some species were outraged at human arrogance. Others were relieved that Earth was willing to help at all. A few understood that the galaxy had changed fundamentally. The Taurian government debated whether to accept human terms. Some argued that accepting help without giving something in return was humiliating. Others pointed out that 3 million people were dead and more were dying every day. Pride seemed less important than survival. The Denari faced similar debates. Their famine was getting worse. Human grain could save millions of lives, but accepting it under Earth's conditions meant admitting they were dependent and unable to care for themselves. The Sardaks struggled with the economic implications. Their mining industry was collapsing. Human technical assistance could restore it, but learning how to maintain their own equipment meant acknowledging they had never truly understood the technology they used. In the council chamber, debates raged about the human ultimatum. Thex argued that accepting Earth's terms would undermine council authority. How could they govern effectively if one species operated outside their jurisdiction? Councillor Preen responded that the council had no authority over humanity anymore. She said that Earth had withdrawn and proven they could thrive alone. She asked what good council authority was if member species were dying from problems that humans could solve. Velen supported Preen. He explained that the council's choice was simple. They could let pride prevent them from accepting help, or they could put their people's welfare first. He said the council had chosen pride over human lives 22 months ago. Perhaps it was time to make a different choice. The debate continued for days. Meanwhile, the swarm advanced deeper into Valix territory. The Taurian death toll reached 4 million. The Denari famine worsened. The Sardax economy contracted further. Finally, Thex called for a vote. He proposed accepting human terms for humanitarian assistance, while continuing to negotiate for better conditions. The vote passed by a narrow margin. Many councillors opposed it, but even they could not justify refusing help when so many were suffering. Thex sent a formal response to Earth accepting the proposed terms. The message felt like defeat even though it was framed as cooperation. He wondered if this was how humanity had felt when they begged for help and were rejected. On Earth, Daniel read the council's acceptance. Paul asked if he felt vindicated. Daniel shook his head. He said there was no victory in this situation. People had died unnecessarily. More would die before the crisis ended. The only win would be preventing future deaths. He authorized the first humanitarian missions. Human ships carrying medical supplies departed for Taurian space. Agricultural specialists prepared to travel to Denari worlds. Engineering teams got ready to assist the Sardax. But this time, humanity was not coming as junior partners or grateful members of a larger community. 3 years after humanity closed its borders, the galaxy looked different than anyone had expected. The Galactic Council still existed and still held political power. But the dynamics had shifted in ways that old councilors struggled to understand. Outside the council structure, humanity had created something new called the Independent Species Coalition. 17 former council members had joined this organization. They were species that had grown tired of being overlooked by the major powers. They were civilizations that wanted genuine partnerships instead of political hierarchies. Ambassador Daniel Grant addressed the coalition's first formal assembly. The meeting took place on a station in orbit around Earth. Representatives from 17 different species listened as Daniel explained the coalition's purpose. He said they were not there to replace the council. He explained that the coalition existed to ensure no species had to beg for help when disaster struck. He talked about building genuine partnerships based on mutual respect. He emphasized that the coalition would not create the same power structures that had failed so many in the council. Dr. Helen Foster presented the Technology Sharing Initiative. She explained that every coalition member would receive training and education, not just finished products. Human experts would help them build their own industries and develop their own innovations. Earth was not creating dependencies. Humanity was creating partners who could stand independently. The coalition faced its first major test quickly. A neutron star collision in the outer reach threatened to devastate several populated systems. The council debated the response for 3 days. They argued about resource allocation and which species deserved priority. They discussed political implications and future favors. The Independent Species Coalition responded in 3 hours. Captain Lisa Monroe commanded the rescue fleet personally. 50 human ships worked alongside vessels from 12 coalition species. They evacuated 4 million civilians before the radiation wave arrived. The operation was efficient and coordinated. No one expected political favors in return. No one calculated future benefits. They simply saved lives because it was the right thing to do. The council took notice of this response. Councillor Preen raised the issue during a session. She suggested formalizing relations with the coalition. She pointed out that they were becoming a significant power block that could not be ignored. High Councillor Thex objected. He called the coalition a rebellion against council authority. He claimed they undermined the established galactic order. He said that acknowledging them would encourage other species to leave the council. Trade Administrator Velen responded calmly. He said the coalition saved lives efficiently, while the council debated politics. He suggested that maybe the council should learn from them instead of fighting them. The debate continued, but the reality was already clear. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed it. The old assumptions about power and hierarchy no longer applied. In human space, Admiral Jake Peterson reviewed fleet reports with satisfaction. The Kryn swarm had been pushed back to their original territory. Coalition forces trained by human military advisors had proven devastatingly effective. More importantly, those forces now understood their own tactical doctrine. They would not need humanity to hold their hands forever. Lieutenant Amy Walsh reported a priority transmission. It was marked personal and came from the Valix homeworld. Jake opened the message and found it was from Thex. The former High Counselor explained that he had resigned from the Galactic Council. He said the Valix Empire was applying for membership in the Independent Species Coalition. They were prepared to accept the educational requirements and partnership terms. Thex wrote that perhaps it was time for older species to remember what genuine cooperation looked like. Jake read the message twice. He told Amy to draft a welcome response. He said to use standard terms with nothing special. Amy asked if he wanted to include any reminder of past conflicts. Jake said no. He explained that Thex had figured things out himself. That was what mattered. The Valix joining the coalition sent shockwaves through council space. If the second most powerful military force was abandoning the council, what did that mean for everyone else? Other species began reconsidering their positions. The PEL submitted a coalition application. The Vex requested information about membership requirements. Even some species that had sided against humanity during the original crisis were exploring options. Counselor Preen watched the council chamber empty over the following months. She understood that the old order was dying. Something new was being born, something that valued cooperation over hierarchy. She called a private meeting with the remaining counselors. She said they needed to face reality. The council could continue pretending they still controlled galactic politics, or they could adapt to the new situation. Velen agreed and added that the council had become irrelevant to many species. He explained that civilizations were choosing the coalition because it offered genuine partnership instead of political games. One counselor suggested that the council could apply to join the coalition. Another laughed and said that would be admitting complete defeat. Preen said that perhaps defeat was better than extinction. The council ultimately decided to maintain independence but establish formal diplomatic relations with the coalition. It was a compromise that satisfied no one but kept both organizations functioning. On Earth, Daniel sat in a garden with his granddaughter Katie. She asked him about his time with the Galactic Council. She wanted to know if the alien counselors were bad people. Daniel thought carefully about his answer. He said they were not bad. He explained that they had forgotten something important. They forgot that every civilization stands on the shoulders of those who help them. They forgot to be grateful. They forgot to be kind. Katie asked if humanity helped them anyway. Daniel smiled and confirmed that Earth did help. He said that helping was what humans do. Not because they expected something in return, but because it was right. Katie wanted to know if the aliens were grateful now. Daniel said that some were learning to be grateful. He added that learning was enough. Across the stars, the lesson continued spreading. In coalition meetings and council sessions, in shipyards and research stations, in schools and hospitals, species were discovering a different way of interacting. The humans had departed in silence after being abandoned by those they thought were allies. In that silence, they had built something better than what existed before. They proved that true strength was not measured in fleets or weapons or political power. True strength was measured in how you treated those who needed help. The Galactic Council learned this lesson the hard way. Their failure to help humanity had reshaped galactic politics and created something that challenged their entire system. The consequences had been severe and far-reaching. But those consequences also brought positive change. Species that joined the coalition learned to be self-sufficient. They developed expertise instead of dependency. They built genuine friendships instead of political alliances. Captain Lisa Monroe stood on the bridge of the Defiant watching coalition ships practice maneuvers. They moved with confidence and skill. They communicated effectively. They had learned well. She thought about the council chamber where Thex had dismissed human pleas for help. She remembered the laughter of counselors who thought Earth was weak. She wondered if they understood yet what they had created by pushing humanity away. Probably not completely, but they were learning. The coalition grew stronger every month. More species joined, more partnerships formed. The old hierarchies continued breaking down. Admiral Jake Peterson reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The swarm was contained. Coalition defenses were holding. Trade was flowing between coalition members. Medical support reached species that needed it. Engineering teams shared knowledge freely. He thought about those 70,000 civilians who died because the Council refused to help. Their deaths had sparked a change that reshaped the galaxy. It was not the memorial they deserved, but perhaps it gave their loss meaning. Dr. Helen Foster presented new research findings to the Coalition Science Council. She showed advances in quantum physics that would improve drive technology for all member species. She explained that human scientists worked with researchers from 9 other civilizations. Together they achieved what none could accomplish alone. Director Paul Martinez watched the presentation and felt something he had not experienced in years. Hope. Not hope that the galaxy would accept humanity, but hope that humanity was building something worth accepting. The Galactic Council continued its operations. They still wielded significant power. They still influenced many civilizations, but they no longer dominated galactic affairs. The Coalition offered an alternative that many species found preferable. Councillor Preen eventually resigned from the Council and joined the Coalition as the Sardac's representative. She said that she wanted to be part of building the future instead of clinging to the past. Veln followed 6 months later. He explained that the Council had taught him many things, but the Coalition taught him something more important. It taught him that partnership was stronger than hierarchy. Humanity never rejoined the Galactic Council. They never needed to. Earth and the Coalition created a system that worked better for them.